This is Dr. Matt Barber of Alabama Orthopedic Clinic. We are proud supporters of Ransom Reprogram, Ransom Ministries, and all of the good work that they do in our community. If you would like to learn more about us, check us out at alortho.com or barbertotaljoint.com. You can also hear more from me personally on the Ortho Real podcast. Thank you again for allowing us to be involved with Ransom Ministries and all of the great work that they do.
Do you know someone who's struggling? Someone who continues to make the wrong decisions? Could that someone be you? Have you had a problem in the past of making decisions that afterwards you were just like, why did I do that? Have you ever wanted to get help and didn't really know how? Have you ever wanted to help someone in that situation and really not understood how to do it? Did you ever ask yourself, why do I keep making these decisions? Or why do they keep making those decisions? We're going to take some time to explore and see this world through eyes we've never looked through and shoes we've never walked in. These are the sons and daughters made in His image with the potential to positively impact our community. This is raw, this is real, and this is Ransom.
With every star, we are born again. Open your heart, spend less time in your head.
This show is brought to you by Ransom Recycling, your number one choice for electronic recycling in Mobile, Alabama. Help reduce waste in our landfills by recycling all of your unwanted, unused, and non-working electronics. Ransom Recycling is a division of Ransom Ministries that is helping to put men and women back to work. Check out ransomministries.com for a complete list of acceptable items. Drop-offs and pickups can be easily scheduled through the website. Please note that we are not accepting TVs at this time. Ransom Recycling, open 8 to 3 Monday through Friday. Help our planet while helping men and women re-enter the workforce.
With every star, we are born again. Open your heart, spend less time in your head.
Hey, welcome to the Ransom Experience. Today I get I don't know if it'd be a great opportunity to interview my wife today. Which I don't know if I'm opening up a can of worms for this or if this is going to be good. So welcome to the show, Tara.
Well, thank you, Matt.
It's so good to have you here today.
Is it?
So today we're going to talk a little bit about what and how Ransom started, but also kind of the method in our madness of how we started it and how we came to the decision that that's the way God was leading us. So I'm going to let you start off. So kind of what, if you look back now 10 years ago, how did it all come about at the beginning of it?
Probably you, just because you're a little crazy, but not crazy, I guess. But I think your desire to find your life's purpose and to be obedient to whatever God called you to do. So we did that Bible study at our church called If You Want to Walk on Water, You Got to Get Out of the Boat. And that really, I think, was what got your wheels turning and kind of got you thinking about what living life truly by faith looked like and what it looked like for us to live a life where we were walking on water, so to speak.
Okay, so we went through the Bible study and then we started coming in. And I'll be honest, before we got married, I was saying, God, I want someone that will speak their mind to me.
And you changed your mind after me.
Yeah, probably, but no, not really. But so I come to you with many different things, like different ideas. And
yes.
So can you?
You have lots of ideas. You're an idea guy for sure, but you don't always know how to make those ideas actually happen. So that's where I think we balance well, because I would think through those things or think out your ideas and if they were actually realistic possibilities for us or not. So I know, like, remember earlier on when you had this idea that you were going to walk to New Orleans with a backpack of canned goods?
I remember that.
Yeah. and that was not a good idea.
She pretty much told me that was the dumbest idea she'd ever heard. So,
Well, it wasn't real smart because, I mean, you would have been in a lot of pain if you had tried to walk that far. And I mean, maybe you would have helped somebody, but we just didn't know a lot about it. I mean, thinking back, like, I guess you had thought about, that it would need to be pop top cans and this and that, but I don't know. I don't think it was really what you were wanting to do.
so if there's people out there like couples that feel God kind of leading them to something, what are some things you could tell them to kind of decide whether or not that was really something God wanted them to do?
Well, I mean, I think it's one thing is that, you'll both be on the same page and be in an agreement about it. And with us, with starting Ransom, then when we figured out what God was saying to us, then he was speaking the same thing to both of us. And through our conversations about it, then we figured out what he was telling us to do.
So like an example would have been when I came to you with kind of the idea of Ransom Cafe, or the cafe
Right.
part, then God had already been dealing with you a little bit.
Yeah, because that's where we started, was with Ransom Cafe, and which when we first got married, you had a restaurant, and I was very anti you having a restaurant because we had small kids and it just wasn't conducive to family life, and so I very much wanted out of that lifestyle.
So everybody out there that loved Matt's Rib Shack, it was her fault that it went out?
All my fault.
Just joking.
Yeah, but you can still make stuffed fries on request. Yeah, but anyway, yeah. So I mean, the cafe thing, like we were praying about it after taking that Bible study and just asking God, what does that look like for us? And sometimes when I ask God for a word, then that's what he gives me, just a word, and I just kept feeling the word ransom and hearing that in my spirit. And I was like, what is that? What is that? What does that mean? And then the scripture, the Matthew 20:28 scripture, but I didn't even know where it was in the Bible. From growing up in church, I just kept hearing that scripture that Jesus didn't come to be served, but to serve others and give his life as a ransom. And I told you that when we were talking about it. And so you actually found where it was in Matthew and looked it up, researched it, and that's when you saw that what was it? The word serve there meant like a server
To
or
wait
one
on
that
tables.
waits on tables. And it was just a lot of confirmation. And ransom was like to liberate many from misery.
right.
So we knew that was what God was calling us to do through waiting tables in a cafe, a donation-only cafe. And that's where we started.
So we started out with the cafes back in 2010.
Right.
We had our first one at Westmobile Baptist, and then as we went, we had other churches come on board, First Christian, Christ United Methodist. We had the Theodore First Baptist. We had a lot of different churches, and I loved how it was
Trinity
different
Family.
denominations that were coming together to do kind of the same thing. So we started that. We started working through that, and then
Right.
you were working another job when we first started. So I came on
Right.
full time here, and then you were still working but helping me kind of move things around.
Yeah.
What was that like, raising little? We had young kids at that time,
Right.
and running a ministry and doing a job.
Right. Well, and at first trying to get it off the ground, then it wasn't like it was overflowing with money or could pay you a salary, but we, were walking in faith and trusting that we were being obedient to what God called us to do. But it was hard because in those first days, while I was still working as the dental hygienist, and I would come home and you would tell me like these cool things you were experiencing, where God had just showed up, like the whole cheese story when you were first in the cafes and going to do pizza, and you were about to opening time, you were there by yourself and didn't have cheese, and a knock on the door and it's somebody with bags of cheese. And it's like just God's provision through all of it. But it was like, oh, I want to be there for that. I don't want to miss those things. But it was all in God's timing. And so eventually I was able to come on full time with you, and it's right when you needed it, I think. So
in the end, we had 7 locations, counting Fairhope, United Methodist, Trinity Family, you mentioned a minute ago. So we
Yeah.
had those 7 locations, and then I come to you with this crazy idea that I didn't really understand homelessness. So I was supposed to go do something that I really didn't want to do. And I was really hoping it was going to be one of those times where you said, you know what, that's a dumb idea. But you didn't.
no.
So explain that, kind of what you went through, because there's a lot of maybe couples out there where maybe one of them is feeling led to do something that might not seem, but you still seem to have a peace about it. So kind of tell me about that.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was. So when you decided you were going to go homeless and try to understand what it was like better, then we had a guy that had been volunteering in the cafes that had been homeless. And so you'd been learning a lot from him. And so I knew that your heart and your intention was in the right place and that it's not something that you would do. I trusted you to know that unless it was God calling you to do it. And part of me wanted to do it with you, but the guy that we were talking to said no, he wouldn't help us do that because he just didn't feel like it was safe for me. It wasn't safe for women, especially on the streets, and that I would put you in danger. And so I certainly didn't want to do that. But I also knew that if I had been in town and knew that you were on the streets, then I probably would have tried to rescue you. So I took the girls and went out of town when you did that. And if I remember, it was like over a Mardi Gras break. So, and I also remember you got to experience kind of all of the different weather scenarios because it was really cold, it rained, it was humid, it was hot, it was all of those within the span of the few days that you experienced homelessness. But let me ask you a question.
Okay.
So why don't you tell me, like, I know when I picked you up and you did come home and you've talked about that shower, but it was noticeable and very visible just what the or how that experience impacted you. So tell people that are listening a little bit about that.
Well, it was a very humbling time for me because I thought we've been doing ministry to homeless and people struggling with, no food or whatever for a little while now. I think a couple years before I did it.
Right.
But I'm out there and I'm meeting just people that are just normal people, just people that you and I would never know that they had the story they had or knowing their story and starting to listen to it. And as I went through that process, I also saw why a lot of the people in poverty or homeless didn't trust other people, especially church people, to be honest. Because I went to a couple churches and, I've shared this story with people and I've spoke at different organizations, but also it and it's on our website. It's in a book now. But one thing I noticed is that people judge people before they even get to know them. So I think through that process, and then when I came home, we went to Africa. We've been all different places serving people, but that was the most life-changing experience that I've ever had because I realized I didn't really know who people were. And that really was the launching. And now we're sitting here telling people stories through this whole podcast, and it's because I think people need to know people's stories before we start judging where they are. And that really transformed the way I look at people, the way that I looked at situations, the way that I feel like God works through people. I can go back at that point and know that that's what changed the way that I serve people and the way that I act myself. So,
Right.
pretty cool.
So one of the other things we started doing when we were serving through the cafes was hosting mission teams and bringing in young people, which was one of my favorite things we did. I really loved that and kind of took the lead on organizing that. And so there was an experience that you were able to have with one group of young people that connected with your homeless experience. So would you share about that?
Sure. So we took these kids. They were from Arkansas, Little Rock, which they came for like 8 years, I guess. And this was the first group that they brought. And there was some senior women or guys and girls. And I said, hey, let's just go drive around. I'm a big guy, and I've always been big on just listening to God's Spirit lead you wherever you want to go. And the more we really search after that, I believe that He'll show us. So we got in a bus. I'm driving, and I have a load of kids in there, and I just said, God, I don't know where you want us to go, but we're just going to go. So I remember driving by a grocery store, a convenience store, and I felt like we were supposed to get 2 cases of water. So we pulled in there. I said, guys, go get 2 cases of water. I gave them the money. They go get the water. And we get back in. They said, what are we going to do? I said, I have no idea. I don't know. We driving. We're going across a parking lot, and there's this guy walking. And I said, let's go get that guy. I think we're supposed to go get him. So I let this guy in the bus with these kids. He's pretty, you can smell alcohol on him. But I said, does anybody out there need water? And so he's, yeah, man, let's go, and I'll show you where it is. So we're driving this homeless guy down the road, and he takes us to this wooded area.
Yeah.
So we get out, and I've got these kids, and there's a tiny little path you could barely see going down through these woods. And he goes, it's right down there, man. So we're following this homeless guy with 2 cases of water and 6, I think there was 6 of them, 6 kids walking into the woods. And
when you promised their parents you would take care of them.
Yeah, but they signed a release, so I wasn't too worried about it. Yeah. But so we get down in there.
I remember seeing the pictures of that, though. It was really cool because it looked almost like a little bit of a small army going to battle, I guess, was the vision.
We go down there, and it opens up into this big area with a bunch of tents. There's like 6 or 7 tents. There's guys laying down there on cots. They're all over. And we get in there, and we get in a big circle, and those guys said, hey, can we pray for y'all? So we get in a circle, and I get real emotional because to know that these kids were willing to go down there.
Yeah.
They didn't care. They didn't think about it. They might have now. But so we get down there, and we got them in a circle, and these guys are praying.
So wait, the homeless guys were praying for you and the team.
Praying for us and the team. For me and the team. So anyway, so we leave there, and this is where it ties to the homeless experience. So when I got the end of my homeless experience, I had a tent, and I had some food that I had gotten from a church. And I said, God, I want to give this away. I felt like it was the last day. So I was looking, and I was in Tillman's Corner, and which is an area of Mobile. And I met this guy, and I felt like he was supposed to have my tent. And so because he had told me that him and his wife had wrapped up in a blue tarp for the last 3 nights. And it was pretty, it wasn't cold, but it was rainy. And so they go back in there and we give it to him. Well, anyway, so then they come in the summertime for this thing. So I go down in there, we get back in, and I think I had some other water in there. I don't even remember now. But so we're driving by the Walmart in Tillman's Corner, and there's a guy sitting there holding a sign. So I said, hey man, you need any water? And he said, yes. I said, well, go over here. So we didn't block the traffic, and we pull over there. And it was the guy that I had given that tent to. And I had just told the kids that story that morning.
Right.
So it was almost like God was like giving us just a wink, like, hey, I'm in this. So we were able to give this guy, and he remembered me and remembered all that. Even though I was homeless at that time, he still remembered me. And we talked to him a while, and the kids were just like blown away. But it was for me too. It was like, man, just keep walking by the Spirit. Just keep doing what God tells you to do, and He's going to show you where to go. But also, I wanted them to see that.
So that was why I loved camp so much, was because to see young people get it. Like you always use this analogy with our camps that, you and I, which we've been married 17 years now, it wasn't as long in some of the times you use those analogies, but you'd say before we were married, if I'd called you on the phone, you wouldn't have known my voice. But now I can say, hey, and it's me because we've spent so much time together. Because often people want to know, how do I know if I'm hearing from God? And that taught them, the more time you spend with Him, the more you'll be able to recognize His voice. But then them actually getting to practice listening to God's voice and hearing Him, and then seeing the excitement in them when they came back from that experience of just listening to God, and that He would speak and that He would lead you if you were open and looking and listening for him to do that.
Yeah, I love camps. They were tiring by the end of it.
Yeah,
Remember that first time we did camp, we slept
was
for
a
like
long
2
week.
days
Yeah.
after that. Keeping
Well,
up with them.
And then there was, I think one time we had to do 2 back to back,
Yeah.
but we survived and it was fun. They were exhausting, but also energizing at the same time because of the experiences with the young people.
That's right.
Or
So after
my
we
favorite.
so we moved on and we did camps up till really last year, I think.
Right.
We were supposed to do our last camp, but then COVID kind of messed us up.
Yeah.
But we realized that we needed to get people out of what needing our services, I guess.
Well, before that, you remember the other thing that came out of your homeless experience was the clean machine.
Yeah, we built the clean machine, which was a trailer with washers and dryers, and that was a whole nother ministry in itself. And we were able to reach so many people and really get to know a lot of people, which led to the next thing, because the more time you spend with someone, you realize their needs and what they need. And,
Right.
and you know, clothes are important, food's
Yeah.
important, things are important, but we felt like the churches could run the cafes. They could run those
Right.
things themselves, because it wasn't doing any good for us to go into their neighborhoods, serve their people, and then leave and come
Yeah.
back a week later. So they took them over, which I think was the best thing we ever did. It was hard at first because they wanted us to keep doing it, but I've seen, and most of them are still going. There's 6 of them that are still
Right.
operating.
And even through COVID, some of them transitioned to just delivering or just doing takeout, but they are still operating because I think it's been a great ministry for those churches, for their community, to help them reach their communities in a practical way.
And that was always our vision, was for them to do it, not for us to do it.
Right.
And so we could open doors for other things that God kind of
Right.
was moving us towards.
So the clean machine was a shower and laundry trailer.
Yep.
Because when you were homeless, you realized how important that was. Because for so many people, when we see guys like you saw with the sign flying, on the corners begging, and you think, get a job. But if they're dirty, their clothes are nasty, they smell bad, then how can they go get hired by any reputable business or have a job that they would sustain? But so when you've got those people and you're doing their laundry, like you said, then that's when you really got to hear their stories. But we also, I think, came to a point that we realized that food and clean clothes and all of those things, we were kind of keeping them where they were and not really helping them get out of poverty. Yep. And that's what we ultimately wanted to do, was to help them create a life that they could sustain, help them regain their independence.
And break that cycle of poverty. And we've talked about our goal was to put our cafes out of business because we didn't want them to need those things anymore.
Right.
So we went along and we started the reprogram, which was job training, and that's a whole nother story. Me and Mr. Bill talked a little bit about that, of how this building came about and where we teach them and how we did it. Explain kind of what you thought about that whole starting the reprogram and all that.
I guess for me, it was another one of those pivotal moments in ministry where it's like, how did we get here? Because we started with a cafe feeding people. But we could also see God confirming that was the direction he was sending us. And we kept trying to go back because with the building in Chickasaw, then we, immediately started planning that it would be a cafe and what would it take to renovate it. We had booths donated from Chick-fil-A. So it was like, well, we tried to go that direction, but the more we tried to go that direction, God kept pushing us in the direction of life skills and job preparedness, And so it was just always those uncertain things. Are we even qualified to do this? Can we do it well? Are there other people that are already doing this? Is there a need for it? And we knew, of course, there was a need for it just from the people we were meeting. But ultimately just making sure that it was what he was calling us to do. And if so, then we would be obedient to that.
So it's like, so those are some of the questions you have to ask when you're starting a new ministry or even new anything, really. You just ask, okay, is this the direction we're supposed to go? It might not look like it's going to work, but as long as you have a peace about it moving forward. And I think we did. And he did show us things along the way that this is where we're supposed to be. So, we've done 31 classes through Reprogram, and you've been instrumental in organizing it, getting it going. And we built good relationships now with other ministries. The Clean Machine helped us build a relationship with McKimmey Place,
Right.
because we did a lot with their ladies and we'd bring it there. Also with all the cafes, of course. And then we started building a relationship with the Home of Grace, where we had their ladies, which Home of Grace is a recovery alcohol rehab for women here in Mobile. And Miss Littleton has run it for 40 some years, and she's a person to look to in ministry on how to have perseverance. So we were great to partner
Right.
with her. And then as we did, we realized too that, hey, we've got to figure out a way to not just give them head knowledge, but also work them. So I came up with some stuff. We built crosses out of
Right.
old stuff.
Well, and what started that was we had a guy in our class, and they have, I think it was story day, where they tell their story, and he was telling his story kind of, but he, big old guy, probably your size, maybe bigger. He was at least 6'3", and did he play football? No.
Had some kids'
He-
sons that did.
Oh, his son did. Well, he could have because he was a big boy. But he stood up there and just wept because of the small things that he was unable to provide his wife. And as much as he wanted to do the class and the training, he couldn't take 8 weeks, I think, of his life that we were asking him to and not make any money or have any income to provide for himself and for her. And I think it was him and through his testimony that we said, we've got to figure this out. We got to figure out a way that they can get some on-the-job training, that they can make money while they're going through the classes and getting this education part that they need. So
Yeah, so that was the step we took we tried different things. Like I said, we made crosses, we
Right.
refinished furniture. We just couldn't generate the revenue because we felt like they needed to be paid while they went through it. We didn't just want to have them do it for free. So we, about a year and a half, or actually 2 years.
2 years.
2 years ago,
Yeah.
we started the recycling, which was a whole cool thing. We could get into how Indianapolis is doing it, and we were up there. You can Recycle Force does the same things we do. But anyway, so as we moved forward, then we got to a point where you were feeling called to something else,
Yes.
which I was like,
I left you.
what?
Yeah.
So at the beginning of this past year, right, around January,
Well, it was
a year ago.
Yeah. Well, actually, I checked, and it was December the 4th
Oh, it was before that's right.
that I emailed my resume because I had felt like, and I had mentioned to you through the years, that I strongly felt like my role that God had me in at Ransom was a supporting role, and that one day He would call me to something different. And
And
but
I fought it for a long time.
yeah, maybe. But so I sent my resume and applied for the executive director position at McKimmey Place and went through the process with them, but just felt like that's what God was calling me to do. And so I started there in February of 2020, right before COVID and the pandemic in March.
Then you were second guessing. weren't you?
Yeah.
That's what you
Then
were
I was thinking, what did I do? Or did I miss God? Yeah, but not really. I mean, I knew I was there and that if He called me there, He would equip me and give me the strength. And I mean, 2020 was a heck of a year for everybody, right?
Yeah.
In different ways, and especially on the Gulf Coast, because not only do we have the pandemic, but then we've had hurricanes, at least two. But we also, at McKimmey Place, they have, or we have shared facilities for years with another organization. And so we were also trying to renovate a building and move our entire operation before the end of the year, which we did. So I think God has blessed, though, my obedience in going there at McKimmey Place, but he's also blessed Ransom too. And I think, it was an adjustment for both of us, but we've survived it.
I think it's
We
been
made it.
good for
It's been
us.
good.
Too, because we can kind of bounce things off each other. Because
You mean us personally?
yeah, us personally, it's
Yeah.
helped us personally, but also, when we come home, we can, what I'm talking about, and we were already partners with McKimmey Place, so I knew
Right.
kind of what they did, so I kind of could help you, and we deal with kind of the same clientele.
Right. And just so if you don't
Right.
know, McKimmey Place is the region's only shelter for unaccompanied homeless women. And so you mentioned we partnered with them using the Clean Machine. And then there was a summer that I would take a group to their day shelter every day. And so I met some of the staff that's still there then. And I don't know. And then through our partnership with the Home of Grace, with Ransom's partnership with the Home of Grace, then I got more involved in the women's classes. And so that's why it was just kind of a culmination of things that I felt like God was calling me to work at McKimmey. So,
Well, you'd always said, too, that you felt like you were going to minister to women,
right.
even when we first started. And so it's been kind of a cool transition, but I think it's also been good for them. I'm very proud of what you do there because I know how hard it is. And I think we complement each other as far as our roles that we have, where we are. So I think it's been good. It's been hard. You're my organizer, and I'm not very organized probably anymore. I'm trying to be more intentional about that for myself. But I think it's been good for us and probably our family to not have depend on the same thing for us.
Well, it was hard, I think, for us, like boundaries, and which it's still a struggle, I think, for anybody in ministry because it's not your typical 8 to 5 job. And, things don't stop just because it's 5 o'clock when you're in ministry. Because even, with McKimmey Place, we're a 24/7 operation, residential shelter. With you, though, your guys know that they can call you, and just because they're not here, then, everybody, like you said, has a story and life gets messy. And so there's plenty of times that you get a text late at night or, I get a phone call on a Sunday afternoon and it's, just part of being a nonprofit and being in ministry. But I think when we were in the same one, then it did become a little bit consuming to our family maybe at times. And so that was something we always tried to guard against, and we had to be intentional about trying to take time or make ourselves not talk about things and to focus on time with our children and those kind of things. And of course our kids are getting older now too, so we don't have to worry about that as much anymore. They don't really want us around.
Yeah, really. We just talk to each other anyway.
That's right. They have their own life.
So as we end, this is going to be the longest podcast I've had
Ever.
so far, which is good because
Well-
I just love talking to you. And we've had a lot of things, anything we didn't cover, you can look in our book. We got a book out called Walking on Water, but also just our websites and all that. But mostly I just wanted us to meet and talk and just get people understand. But one thing I wanted to get out of this whole podcast was if there's people out there, couples or even individuals that are really feeling like they're supposed to do something different than they're doing,
Yeah.
whatever that is, what's the advice you could give them?
Just do it.
Just do it. That's
Just
right.
do it.
Come on.
And listen, I mean, like we had family that thought we were crazy because you
Yeah, y'all
were.
hear that out there?
Yeah,
The ones that call us
our
crazy?
family.
They still
thought
call
we
us
were
crazy.
because we had small children and you were stepping away from a paying job, and how are we going to make it, and what about health insurance, and what about this and what about that. And yeah, I mean, you have to plan for all those things, and I'm not advising anybody to be reckless or but I think you also there's a point where, like you mentioned, you have a piece that if God's calling you to do something, then he's going to provide for you to be able to do it. And not that, I mean, it certainly has not been easy. You know, there's been many times that we wanted to give up. And I tell you, you have probably been more constant or in your faith. And my faith has been increased from our adventure through Ransom multiple times, because there'd be times that I want to give up. And I'd say, God, if we're done with what you called us to do, then just release us from it. Just show us. This is all for your glory anyway, not for ours. And if we're done, we're good with that. And then, you know, there would be more money or more this or more that, different things come up that would show us that we weren't done. Just he would provide whatever we needed at the time, whether it was finances or equipment or building or, you know, just through things that he provided, and he would guide and direct. And I don't know, but I look back and I think even our family would say now that from our journey, they probably weren't sure that 10 years later we'd still be doing this, and that their faith has also been increased just from watching our adventure.
I think that's probably pretty fair. I know mine's been built over the time, and you and I together. I mean, it's funny because as a couple, a lot of times one of us will be like at the point of, I don't know if there was very few times where both of us were wanting to give up.
Right.
You know, there was always just one of us. And one thing I could tell people out there is, hey man, just talk to each other about it. Be honest. God wants you to be honest. And if you don't want to do it, don't hide it. I mean, just say, hey, I'm tired of this. I'm tired of the way it is. I'm tired of it. And God will listen to you, and then he'll say, are you done now whining? Let's move forward and let's do what we're supposed to do. And
Right.
we've seen that through this whole process, and I wouldn't change it really for nothing. And I'm so glad that I get to do it with you.
Yeah.
I'm so glad that we get to experience these things together, because I think it's built us as a married couple,
Right.
but also just as friends. And I think that when you fight through doubt and fear and all those things, it helps you as individuals, but also as a couple. And so I tell you, I'm with you. If he's telling you to do something, just do it. I mean, you can talk yourself out of anything.
Absolutely.
You can try to figure out what ain't going to work. Let's try to figure out what's going to work. So I think this has been good. It's went longer than our normal, but I'm hoping people got something out of it and hope they enjoyed it. Man, I can't wait till next week. We get to talk to Abby, which is our daughter.
That's a little scary.
And yeah. So we're going to talk to her and let y'all find out what it's like to be a kid that grew up in this. And now she's a 19-year-old young woman who's going to college. And I just want her to share kind of her experience. So hopefully you'll tune in next Wednesday and when we'll bring that one to you. So we appreciate you joining us today. Thanks, Tara, for taking time out of your busy schedule
you, Matt.
for us. And
I
it's been
appreciate it.
an honor to interview you.
Thanks.
Too many days in the darkness without a glimpse of the light. Running tired and broken and scared, but I swear I'll never give up the fight. With every star